America is currently waiting for the Oregon militia men to run out of snacks. But what are they waiting for? In this video, you're going to see a man who is out in the snow, and apparently he's waiting for death. Let's watch.
He says he believes there's a warrant out for his arrest, and he does not anticipate respecting that warrant. He's got a gun here under the blanket. And LaVoy, why don't you tell us what your plan is?
I do not want the FBI, federal agents, have to go running around in the dark, kicking in doors, looking for me, okay? I want them to know exactly where I'm at.
So if they come here with an arrest warrant and they try to put cuffs on you, what's your plan?
Well, they're not going to just come up with a guy holding a rifle and put cuffs on him, okay? They're not going to do that.
What do you think they're going to do, and what are you prepared to do?
Well, I hope that they go home.
When that warrant comes down, when that arrest comes, what do you tend to do in response?
I have been raised in the country all my life. I love dearly to feel the wind on my face, to see the sunrise, to see the moon in the night. I have no intention of spending any of my days in a concrete box. And so I will, whatever days, and I believe that there'll be many, and hopefully prosperous days to come, I will spend them riding my horses, trying to take care of my cows, and that's what I will do. But I will not spend it in a box.
So to avoid getting in that box, you're ready to do what?
You guys have so many hypotheticals.
If they come here and try to arrest you, they
Yes.
point a gun at you, they try to put cuffs on you, how far are you willing to take this?
Well, don't point a gun at me. You don't point a gun at somebody unless you're going to shoot them. That's the first thing your thought is, don't point guns at people. And so I'm telling them right now, don't point guns at me.
So you're prepared to die, better dead than in a cell?
Absolutely. Dude, would you like to be in a cell? Nobody wants to live their life in a cell. Absolutely, I'm not going to live my life in a cell.
The incredible thing about that video that stands out to me the most is the sense of entitlement that he has, right? And there was a very thinly veiled threat there where, you know, he was asked, what do you do if the cops show up with a warrant and they try to put cuffs on you? And he's like, well, I got that rifle. Yeah. You know, I'm paraphrasing him, obviously. I don't remember his exact words. But he said that the cops aren't going to do anything to a man who has a rifle. Mm-hmm. So he's basically indicating that he would be willing to use that rifle on police. Yeah. He's armed. They're very clear about the fact that they're armed. The way that they've been treated with, you know, such careful, you know.
We don't want to offend them.
I mean, it's amazing. And that's what leads to that sense of entitlement. He believes that he's undefeatable, right? That nothing bad could possibly happen to him because nothing bad does happen to guys who talk like this, who have the certain privileges that we talk about on the show that people deny on a regular basis. That right there is white privilege, okay? The fact that he's being taken care of by authorities, and what I mean by taken care of is they're not aggressive with him at all, right? The fact that he doesn't have to worry about the same violence and brutality that minorities in this country have to deal with is white privilege. That's what white privilege is, okay? It doesn't mean that you as a white individual didn't earn the things that you have in your life. It doesn't mean that you aren't a good person. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person by default just because you're white. It means that authorities handle you in a very different way from how they handle minorities. Yeah. If that was a black man sitting there saying that he has a rifle and he's willing to use it, I guarantee you he would not get the same treatment that this gentleman got in that video.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't have been there for 3 days.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they would have all been shot, but the cops would have been moved in, and they would have taken them out in handcuffs. Yeah. And look, that's what inevitably is going to happen here, unless they simply walk away, which is probably going to happen because, as I said, they're running out of Twinkies and Pop-Tarts. And look, it might seem like he said, I'm going to sit outside so they don't have to bust down the doors. Understand, it's not a great sacrifice. They already turned off the power to that place. It doesn't have heat anyway. It's probably snowing inside the buildings. Look, the guy comes across as an insane person. He says, you don't point a gun at someone unless you plan to shoot them. Oh, why do I have a gun in my lap? No big deal, no reason. Yeah. What the fuck do you have the gun for? So that you can kill people. And all the idiots who for the past 3 or 4 days have been telling me online, why do you keep saying that they're dangerous and violent? Why do you keep saying that? Maybe because they keep threatening to kill people. Maybe because when the cops go, he's implying he'll gun down the cops. So who do you care about more? The innocent cops who are just trying to do their jobs and are going to be killed by some asshole who's telling you days in advance he wants to kill them just so that he won't be led away into a box? As if he had to be sitting in front of that tarp in the first place? He'd have to fucking be there. You could be riding your cows and your giraffes back at your ranch if you wanted to. You chose to go to that place to make this stupid political stance. And they had a statement, by the way, from the Oath Keepers, because people have been criticizing them for having women and children there. Now, you don't see any in that video, but there are reports that there are women and children. And the Oath Keepers said in this statement, this is not a family event. The only people there should be the armed men who are willing to die there with Ammon Bundy and his brothers and a couple of embedded reporters. The men who are willing to die there, and he's echoing that same language there, willing to die. These guys think that they're in this situation like Waco. That like, it's come to this. There's no way out. Like, they're not Thelma and Louise, man. You went there to make this political statement. And the reason is, and these guys go from state to state getting involved in these little local matters because they are so fucking desperate for the fantasies that they hold that they're the next fighters of the American Revolution, and they want to find it wherever they can. And I apologize. I love fantasy, and I have my own fantasies, but real life, unfortunately, is not as interesting as fantasy.
Why don't you tell us what your fantasies are?
My fantasy is not to die in a shootout with the police, I can tell you that. These guys want to be heroes, but you're not a fucking hero, man. You're not Divergent, you're not in Gryffindor, you're not a space marine. Real life ain't that exciting, and I apologize that you were born into America that didn't desperately need a revolution. The rest of us are just trying to get our fucking cappuccinos in the morning, make some work that hopefully people enjoy, do that every couple days, have some kids, and then die. That's life now, but these guys think that they're the last defenders of liberty. Because gun rights are so restrictive here that jackass is sitting there with a gun saying he's going to murder cops. Nobody's taking his gun away. How did they maintain these beliefs that they're living under the iron boot of some sort of weird hybrid of Mao and Saddam Hussein? And people are defending them.
I know.
People who wouldn't defend, if he looked anything other than what he looks like, they wouldn't be defending him.
So I want to talk a little bit about the people who defend them, because they are the same people who will defend police officials who gun down unarmed individuals or clearly use excessive force when dealing with people, right? These are the same people who think that it's okay for the cops to use this type of excessive force because, hey, you know what? The people that they attack were imminent threats to them. So the support is necessary. But at the same time, why isn't there support for cops in this scenario? Yeah. Right? There's very little support for cops. Cops are the enemies in this case. You have people who are protesting, claiming that they're willing to use their firearms against these cops, and the same people who've been defending the cops who shoot down black people are unwilling to defend the cops in this situation. It's really interesting how the support is convenient based on what your agenda is.
Yeah. Yeah, and understand, before you think that we've just revealed some sort of hypocrisy that we have, no, we're using the comparison between how these two different groups are treated to point out the inequity in one of the sides. We're consistent. We don't want the cops to kill either group of people. I want the cops to go in, handcuff these jackasses, and put them in jail for a couple of months, which is probably what's going to end up happening. We don't want anyone to be killed by the cops. That's entirely consistent.
Yeah.